I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're sleeping on Masterverse. Okay, alright, maybe that's a little over the top, but let's talk about Masterverse, specifically New Eternia, which is a specific segment within the Masterverse toy line. Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan. Thank you for joining me for another video here on the channel. Hey, real quick, if you enjoy what I do here, if you enjoyed today's video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It really does help the channel grow and reach more people. All right, let's get on with it. Masterverse. This is Mattel's 7-inch scale collector line for the Masters of the Universe brand, and it's been running for a few years now. I'll be perfectly honest, and I've said it before, when this line kicked off, it certainly wasn't my favorite Masters of the Universe toy line. But as the years have gone on, I really feel like it has started to find itself, specifically within the New Eternia subset, which is sort of like Mattel's own new interpretations of a lot of these classic characters, sometimes rooted in concept art, paying homage to the history that came before it, but still doing its own thing. And I think that was such a good move for this brand. You see, one of the things that I still see on a regular basis every single time one of these new figures comes out is, well, I prefer the Masters of the Universe Classics version. And you know what? I can't even fault anybody for thinking that. The Masters of the Universe Classics toy line was something special. I mean, that toy line was one of those dream toy lines for Masters of the Universe fans. It essentially took the vintage action figures and brought them up to a 7-inch scale made for collectors. And it covered a lot of ground. Plus, it had the talent of 4 Horsemen toy design behind it, and it was a totally fan-driven line. It's one of my all-time favorite toy lines, so I get it. But Masterverse is doing something different in a good way. There's been so many toys coming out over the past couple years, it's been hard to keep up with them, and Masterverse is no exception. I had stacks of these figures sitting in my studio from all my pre-orders coming in. It took me a long time to get to them, but over the holidays, I decided to rip them all open, and I just had so much fun with so many of these figures that I decided I wanted to put together one giant video talking about all of them. There's going to be a lot of figures talked about from recent waves, specifically focusing on the New Eternia figures. So I'll do my very best to put chapters within this video, so if you want to skip to whichever figures you really care about, you'll have the option to do so. But after you do that, go back and play through the whole video, because that's good for the algorithm. Alright, joking aside, let's jump into Masterverse New Eternia. Holy moly, we've got a lot of figures to squeeze into a video here, but holy cow, can we just take a moment to appreciate this? Now, I am not a mint inbox collector when it comes to this stuff. I always open these up, clearly, because I'm also doing these videos. But when you see all of these spines lined up next to each other, you cannot deny how gorgeous that looks. I really love the box change for Masterverse within this past year, because getting this gorgeous artwork on the spine where we get a full shot of the character with a portrait up above that, oftentimes showing their alternate head in the package. I mean, this is beautiful. It's colorful, it's vibrant, and it really does a great job of showing off exactly why Masters of the Universe is such a cool property. Alright, so of the figures we're going to be taking a look at here today, one of them is Thunder Punch He-Man. You can see that awesome artwork on the front of He-Man just socking it to Skeletor, which is absolutely amazing. And then, of course, the back of the package shows the figure as well as all of his accessories within. And because you can't have too many He-Man figures, according to Mattel's business model since the 80s, we've also got Flying Fist He-Man in New Eternia style. And again, awesome artwork on the front with Flying Fist He-Man going into battle against Too Bad. You can see the Eternia towers in the background there. Look at that pink sorceress which is pretty cool stuff. And then the back shows the figure as well as all of his accessories. We're also going to be taking a look at Fisto here today. Again, love the box art on this one. Fisto going into battle against some demons there. You can see He-Man helping out on the spine on this side, with the back of the box once again showing us the figure and all of his accessories. Ooh, this is one I've been excited for from the second they showed him off. I can't wait to open him up. Mer-Man looks fantastic. And again, gorgeous artwork on the front with him under the sea, looking up to the surface where Manny Faces is doing battle with Beastman. God, this artwork is so, so good. And then the back has an image of the figure and his accessories. Skeletor also got the battle armor treatment here in the new Eternia line. Here he is on the front doing battle with some snake men. You can see Evil Lyn also in the background here. I think she's helping Skeletor, but you never know with her. Look at King Hiss sitting on a throne in the background. Pretty cool stuff. And then there's our action figure on the back. Speaking of Evil Lyn, she's also on the docket for a review today. Beautiful artwork of the character there on the front with a Skeleton, which is very cool. You can also see Panther on the side. Look at that look for Panther there. He almost has like leopard spots, which is pretty cool. And then look at the moon up there. Has a bit of that Nordor vibe going on, right? That's pretty sweet. And then the back of the box, well, there's our figure, of course. And lastly, from this particular batch, we've got Sy-Klone, another one I've really been looking forward to. I think he's just such a fun character there. And he is also doing battle with some Skeletons. Holy cow, Skeletor's up there flying the Dragon Flyer. Oh, that is amazing. And once again, the figure pictured on the back of the box. And that will bring us to this. The Masterverse New Eternia Skeletor's Throne. Holy cow. So this comes in a huge box. And as you can see, we've got gorgeous artwork on the front here depicting Skeletor sitting in his throne. As we rotate around to the side of the box, Evil Lyn, Screech, and Panther are kind of off to the wing in that side. And then over here, we've got Beastman and Mer-Man. Just awesome artwork. And then the back with this very cool snake curled up in the back there. From deep within Snake Mountain, Skeletor rules from the Bone Throne, an ancient artifact crafted by the original inhabitants of Snake Mountain from the poisoned bones of wyverns. The Bone Throne now serves as a conduit for Skeletor's havoc magic to seek out and capture the power of Grayskull. Interesting, making it a source of power. So the really interesting thing about this is inside of that box, we actually have a full-on carded Skeletor figure. Like, how cool is that? He's actually in the standard Masterverse New Eternia Skeletor packaging. So it even features some beautiful artwork on the spine. Look at that with his hood down so you can see the full skull there. Really cool stuff. This is good for those mint on card collectors who maybe actually want to put these up on their shelf or line them up so you can see all the spine artwork there. So it's pretty cool that this version of Skeletor gets one of these boxes covered in original artwork. It's very cool. And then the second box in here, this is the one that should actually house the throne that we will need to assemble. And look at this. Wow, that is incredibly cool. I also love, like, there's some texture on here too. Like, all of these stones feel as though they're like protruding from the box. You got Skeletor's name on the front there. Like, you can kind of see some of the, like, the faces that are in the walls of Snake Mountain. Look at that. How cool is that? So this should just open up like so. Ah, yes. And then assembly required, because here is our throne. So we'll get this all put together and then we will check it out proper. This is what we end up with. This is a really impressive looking piece just right out of the box. Of course, it comes with a Skeletor figure, and as always, the Masterverse figures are at that 7-inch scale. So the throne itself, I mean, look at this. From the bottom of the base all the way up to the top of that bone throne, I mean, we're looking at about 11 inches tall altogether, which is really impressive for this thing. So I'm going to push the throne off to the side because let's talk about this Skeletor real quick. We've had plenty of Skeletors already in the Masterverse line with the new Eternia line, but this is still a really nice looking Skeletor. First of all, he does have this cape accessory, which is a cloth cape. You can see it's a little tattered at the bottom, and this is attached to this extra armor piece here. Now this just sits right there over his torso. So if you want him to have the cape, it just rests over his standard armor, but it's easy to remove that, which gives you a much more basic looking Skeletor. With some embellishments, like he's got gold on his armor, gold crossbones on the chest, this gold eagle type face on the belt, and then the gold emblem there on his shin guards. The rest of it is the standard purple, and it's this really nice metallic purple. I mean, look at the way that shimmers and shines under the lights. I think it looks really, really nice. And then we got to talk about that Skeletor head sculpt. I think this is a pretty fantastic Skeletor head sculpt. It's got more of that demon-like look to it, very similar to the early Alcala artwork from those original mini comics. I think that's what the inspiration was here. I also love that this is a Skeletor with an articulated jaw. I think articulating the jaw on Skeletor is such a great move because look at him with that mouth open. I think that looks amazing and really does give vibes of those early mini comics. The skin tone is like a very kind of faded gray or muted gray, and there's this really interesting kind of dry brushing on there that's like a purpley dry brush. I don't know if that's supposed to be like his shiny armor reflecting off his skin. It doesn't stand out too much, but when you're really looking at it, especially under light, you can see these like purpley highlights on his muscles, and it's a bit interesting, but all in all, I think this is a really cool looking Skeletor figure. And if you're looking for like a good basic Skeletor in the scale, I think this is one that could work, especially if you like the look of those older mini comics, because I think this one fits in for that look really, really well. But the throne, obviously, is like the big deluxe piece here. So this is certainly inspired by the way the throne looked in the original Filmation series, but it's kind of got its own thing going on here. It's definitely a little bit more detailed than what we've seen before. And we've seen Skeletor's throne in toy form a couple times now. We did get one in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, which was also very Filmation inspired, and we even got one recently with the MOTU Origin Snake Mountain playset. So we have had thrones. And this one is certainly a lot more elaborate than what we've seen before. I really like the real fur cushion that is sitting on the throne there. I think that is a really, really nice touch. You got these great details here of look at these skulls at the base. What type of creature is that? Is it Andrenids? Are those Buzz-Off's race? They've got these little antenna sticking off the skull, so I guess that's possible. These look like jawbones coming off the sides here, and then all the way up at the top, you've got, the big main skull up there. So, I don't know, I love the look of it. The bones are very cool on there, but there's a lot more going on here. You can see it's got the big purpley base here, and there are electronics with this. So, on the bottom, you can see we've got a screwed-on battery compartment. This does take 3 AAA batteries, but by putting the batteries in there, you do have a push button. And when you press on the button, you do get some light-up effects there. And it's really cool because pushing the button a couple times will change the effect. So you can have this flickering orange flame effect. Pressing it again will shift the color, so you might get some red flickering lights. It's just a really cool look overall, especially when you're in a darker, more dim lit scene here. Under my studio lights, those don't really look like they're glowing pretty bright, but when it's just in standard lighting or in a dim room, it's a pretty fun effect. Now, interestingly, we do have 2 staffs on the back side of the throne. And of course, it's very snake themed because obviously, at this point, the way the canon works, it's kind of been this way since the 2000X era. The original inhabitants of Snake Mountain were the Snake Men, so this throne was likely designed by the Snake Men. So we've got these little Havoc staff holder over here with the snake theme, and then we've got another staff that it comes with which I believe is supposed to be the Staff of Ka. You know, the snake staff like what Teela carries, but, you know, was a Snake Man artifact. So this is really cool. Now, these are actually made of like a soft, pliable plastic, so they do flex around a little bit, but you can press the staffs into the top of those, and they should stand kind of straight up, though I do have a little bit of leaning going on this side because the plastic's so pliable on those snakes that mine's already kind of bent out of shape. So unfortunately, my snake staff, my Staff of Ka, is not standing upright, but the Havoc staff is. And so you can see the Havoc staff is just plugged in over here as well. So you can have the staffs plugged in when Skeletor is not holding it, but of course the Havoc staff can also just be held by Skeletor if that's something that you want to do. And Skeletor does look pretty great sitting on this throne. Sometimes it's hard to get an action figure to sit and look natural, and I do struggle with that just a little bit here with this figure, but playing around with it, you can definitely get it to look pretty cool. He does have an open hand so that it kind of looks like it could be resting on the armrest there. There are also foot pegs down here so you can plug his feet into if that's something that you want to do. You can have him holding on to the Havoc staff, or like I said, put the Havoc staff in the holder back there. I don't know. I think this is a really fun display. Like if you're into diorama pieces or you just want like a really cool like centerpiece for Skeletor on your shelf, I think this is a really cool set. And like I said, it was a bit of a surprise. Not something I was expecting to see them do in the Masterverse line. Oh, and one more thing. You can actually convert the box or the inner box into a backdrop if you want to. You've got this large base that the bottom part of the box turns into. You've got a cool little backdrop that even has some neat homages to the faces in the walls on the Snake Mountain playset. And then we can take the throne and we can just rest it up here on top. It definitely takes up a lot of real estate this way, but you know, it's kind of cool that they did this. One of those things that Mattel has always been really good about is creative, fun packaging, especially for exclusives, and this is definitely one of those. All right, so let's go from our main villain to our main hero. Let's take a look at another He-Man figure that's part of the new Eternia segment. This time, it's new Eternia's version of Thunder Punch He-Man. And look, I've been outspoken about this in a lot of my videos. He-Man seems to be one of the hardest likenesses to get right in the Masterverse line, especially. And a while ago, just not that long ago, we got a really cool new Eternia version of Faker. And even in that video, I talked about how great that head sculpt was and how this is what should be repainted for He-Man. Well, they did it, and I'm not sure the results are as good as I was hoping they would be. So I do believe that this is that same head sculpt that we saw on that Faker that is being used here for the new Eternia version of Thunder Punch. Look, it's definitely been worse than this, but I'm still not totally in love with this. You guys will have to let me know what you think. First of all, I do think the eyes aren't painted super great on this one. Like, he almost looks like he's rolling his eyes. He looks like he's looking up a little bit. And I don't know if it's like the shading that they put on the face or what it is exactly. But man, it's just, I don't know. If you guys think I'm being nitpicky, that's fine. You can tell me I'm being nitpicky. It's just, I don't know, something about He-Man's face. It's like he's got a very specific look. So it's really hard to get that right, I think. But let's take a look at the rest of the figure here. So this is inspired by the Thunder Punch He-Man variant from the original toy line. And a lot of the figures in new Eternia are kind of rooted in some of the concept art for a lot of these characters with some new ideas as well. I don't know if this one is specifically based on any sort of concept art for the original Thunder Punch He-Man, so I'm going to assume that these are all newer embellishments. He's got that same red armor, very similar to what you saw on the vintage toy, and he even has a backpack, which is where you would plug in the caps on the original figure for the cap firing sound. And look at this. They even included this little gold ring that plugs into the backpack here to pay homage to the caps from the vintage figure. And this is fun. You can turn the dial and it clicks.
click, 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 click. I guess that's kind of like your little popping there. But yeah, he's also got these new armor pieces that are on his arms that almost look like maybe they're supposed to be some sort of like mechanized armbands that make his punch more thunderous, make it more powerful. That's probably what's going on there. And then just kind of a standard He-Man look down below that with the furry loincloth and the furry boots. I mean, the paint deco all looks really good on all of the rest of this here. But of course, the accessories with this are what's really, really fun. Now, first of all, we got interchangeable hands, and we've got 2 pairs of gripping hands and 2 closed fists. So this is great. We can go Thunder Punch with both hands if we want to. But he's got his shield and a gold sword. So again, paying homage to that vintage figure with a gold colored power sword here. And the shield even looks similar to the shield on the vintage figure. You can store the sword on it just like on the vintage toy. And just like that gold cap was in his back, there's also a red ring homage to the caps as well. You could plug either of those into either the shield or the backpack, so it really depends on if you'd rather it have gold or red in here. I put red on the shield so we can see it, just because that feels right with Thunder Punch He-Man. I do like how we've got the He-Man H logo straight off the vintage figure right there on the shield as well. So the way this works this time is there's actually a little peg on the back of it, and both of his arms have a peg hole so that the shield will plug on to that armor there. So you can have him store the sword on his arm, or you can, of course, hold the sword, have the shield on one arm. Pretty cool stuff. But this is Thunder Punch He-Man. So we got to have that punching power, right? So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to swap on both fists here. Double thunder punching action. So you can do that, obviously, if you've never seen that before, just by pulling the hand out of the wrist peg. They're actually a very tight fit. And then to simulate our Thunder Punch, you don't get one, you get 2 of these yellow burst effects that could plug onto the hands. The hand should squeeze inside there. There we go. And look at this. We can have 2 hands that are fired up, ready for some thunder punching action. I think this is a really fun figure. My biggest criticism, I think, is still that head sculpt. Like, I don't know if we could get He-Man's head right. I like everything else that's done here. I think this is a really fun, modern version of a classic variant in the MOTU toy line. Let's jump from one He-Man to another, because we also recently received the new Eternia Flying Fists He-Man. And I want to start this with a quick comparison between these two figures, because I believe they are utilizing the exact same head sculpt, but the paint deco on the Flying Fist version is better, at least in my opinion. I do think this is an improvement over this. And with the right paint job, this might just be an okay head sculpt. Maybe still not perfect, because I don't know if I could say perfect, but this is a lot better. So I do want to give the nod on that. I think that looks much better than Thunder Punch He-Man. So this is another one that is inspired by a vintage toy variant. And Flying Fist He-Man was my favorite in the original line when I was a kid. And the reason for that was because he had vac metallized armor. He was very shiny. So I'm going to do that thing that I always do. This doesn't have vac metal armor, but that's okay. I think this looks pretty great. So it is in like a darker, almost grayish silver color, but you can see it's got that marbleized swirl in there. I don't know if that's coming through. It actually looks quite nice. Plus it's highlighted with this really shiny gold paint on the bottom and wrapped around the arms. Overall, I think this looks pretty nice. And then for the whole new Eternia element, we've got some very cool new embellishments with the shoulder armor that is modeled after the cat head on Eternia Tower. How cool is that? I love this. I think that looks really, really cool. Now, if you decide that you don't like that, this armor is removable from the shoulders, and I've done this already once. This is pretty tight, but you can see it's just plugged in. These little pegs here. Ooh, I definitely don't want to break it. There we go. Okay, a little bit of work. Boom, you could pop it out. So if you just want the armor without the shoulder armor, you can do that. You are going to have these large little pigs sticking up there. Honestly, I think this looks pretty darn cool. I like it. I think it's a really fun new little embellishment added to the armor. Plus the fact that it's tied to the Eternia tower, that's even cooler. This is new as well. You got this little extra little piece here, this adornment on the loincloth. And now he's wearing these very cool metal boots. So they definitely added quite a bit to this one. The shield looks very similar to the shield on the vintage figure. You can even spin the little blade thing on the outside. This goes over the wrist, and then he can also hold onto it as well. It actually goes on the arm pretty nicely there. And then you've got the crazy, weird little spinny bola weapon thingy from the vintage figure. So the vintage figure had like an action feature where like you would twist his body and it would make his arms move up and down, and by doing that it would cause the shield and the blade to spin, which is why all these weapons spin the way they do. So the way they handled it this time is you actually have a handle on here, and so he can hold that in his gripping hand, and then it plugs down onto his forearm, and it actually locks on there pretty tight, and that will add your little blade weapon, your spin blade? No, it's not that, He-Man. But honestly, I think this looks really cool. I like this quite a bit. I think that is a really fun update to one of my all-time favorite variants of He-Man. One other thing I got to show you, though, he also comes with interchangeable hands that are gloved hands. Now, these are closed fists, so he won't be able to hold on to the blade or the shield with these. I suppose these are maybe they're supposed to be like metallized gauntlets. So if you want some punching hands that are, you know, shiny and gold, well, you can do that too. I kind of wish they would have done the gold on the gripping hands as well. I think that would have looked really cool and would have added to the overall new look of this figure. But all in all, I really like this one. I think this is pretty darn fun for a He-Man figure in the Masterverse line. And now we're back to another Skeletor. Just like in the vintage toy line, gosh, just like in every Masters of the Universe toy line, it is packed filled with He-Man and Skeletor variants. But this Skeletor is awesome. I love this one. So this is a new take on Battle Armor Skeletor, with the Battle Armor figures being arguably some of the most famous versions of He-Man and Skeletor out of the original toy line. But this is a really, really cool update to that entire concept. First of all, he is now rocking this incredibly cool helmet. It's got the ram horns coming off the spine, his Havoc staff, or, you know, we've also seen Panther with a ram horn helmet. So that is pretty cool. But this helmet is also removable. Look at that. You can pull that right off of the figure. And then you are left with this really cool head sculpt. I love this. I loved how like it almost has like this animated vibe to it where it's a little over the top. Like look at the cheekbones and all of the details in there. You got the red eyes that are glowing through, and the jaw is articulated again, which is awesome. And then he's got like this chainmail skull cap, which is just so cool. I mean, this is just a really, really cool look for Skeletor, I think. The armor that he's wearing over his torso is a direct homage to the actual battle armor, including the little emblem there, the bat that's outlined in green, highlighted in pink. It is very cool. And in order to achieve the battle damage of the vintage figures, we just have a swappable plate. Now, only one, so we only get to swap it to the 2 scratches there. But it's actually really easy to do. It works really well. You can just pry out this plate right here, and then we can replace it with the new one. It actually like kind of clips in place really good. I think that is one of the best functionalities we've seen for the battle armor so far. Like, I remember in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, it was a similar thing, but you actually had to take the armor off because it clipped in on the inside and outside. This works surprisingly well. I like this quite a bit. And obviously, this is different than having the rolling drum in the chest where you would clip it. That's one of the best action features ever. But this is a really cool way to still have like battle damaged armor on your battle armor Skeletor. New, of course, are the shoulder pads up here, very similar to what we saw on the Flying Fist He-Man, but these are like purple with the spikes. I love the color of the armor as well. It's all got this very cool metallic look to it. You can almost see like this silver dry brushing effect on there or something. There's something in there that gives it this really great shine. I think it looks fantastic. You see Ram Skull on the belt there, which is from the Havoc staff. I love kind of the cloth loincloth pieces. And then even on the boots, look at that, full feet covered in like armored boots. This is just a really cool Skeletor. Like, he just looks tough and imposing with that armor on. And he does come with a few accessories that we can arm him up with. He does have a curved, what is that, scimitar type sword. I don't know if that's probably not the right type of word for that, but the early Masterverse new Eternia Skeletor we got had a curved sword like that, which was actually based on some earlier concept art, I believe. And then he's also got this axe as well. So look at this. We can arm him up with dual wielding bladed weapons here. And that armor, man, I just think that armor looks so cool. This is just a great look for Skeletor. Looks like he's powered up or just souped up somehow. I like this quite a bit more than the battle armor He-Man that we got in the new Eternia line. That one with the weird head sculpt with the beard. I think this Skeletor is amazing. This is one of my favorites for sure. All right, let's take a look at a non-He-Man or Skeletor character. This is the new Eternia version of Fisto, and it's another redesign that I really like. So let's talk about all the differences here on this particular version of Fisto. Let's start by looking at the armor, because the armor is, of course, very recognizable. It looks like the armor you would expect Fisto to be wearing. Looks like what the vintage figure had. Actually looks a little bit more like the updates from the 2000X series, but it's even more detailed than that. You can see kind of those new intricacies sculpted in, the details up on the shoulders. I also really like the sculpted fur coming out from underneath the shoulders. I think that is just a very, very cool look. It's got a really nice purple and silver color scheme going on there. But the biggest difference, which I'm sure you've spotted already, is the fact that this version of Fisto doesn't just have a giant metal fist. He's got an entire robotic arm, which is a really interesting take for this character. And look, it is very robotic looking all the way through there. You can see it's got circuitry sculpted on. The elbow looks sort of like gears, and you can see we can bend at that elbow there, and it almost looks like some gears turning. And then the fist itself looks very traditional for Fisto with like the rivets on there. I do like that you can even swivel the wrist on the fist there. Of course, I showed you that elbow bend. You could swivel at that bicep. So yeah, all molded in a really nice kind of shiny silver plastic. But this is like a Fisto that has had his entire arm replaced with cybernetics. And that's a really interesting take for this character. But I think it works here. I like it. I like it as something a little bit different for the character. Plus, you look at this, and this still looks like Fisto. I do really like the head sculpt here too. You'll notice he's got that headpiece on, which is something that we saw in the 2000X era, and I think that carries over very nicely here. But this version of Fisto also has a longer beard with the gray streak going down the front of it, so maybe he's a little older, a little wiser, this Fisto. But he's also got this ponytail coming out of the back. I think it's a really cool look for the character. It really suits the character well. But he also comes with an additional head. So if you want something that looks a little bit more like a traditional Fisto head, you've got that option too with the shorter hair and the shorter beard there. No graying in the beard. Both head sculpts I think are really good. I like them both. But just to make this one really stand out as something on his own, I think personally I'll be displaying him with that longer beard and the ponytail. I think it's a very cool look for the character. Now on his back, you might have noticed that there is a sword holstered there. And this sword is a bit different looking than what we've seen for Fisto in the past. Usually he's got like a larger, like straight sword, but this is more like a cutlass type sword. You know, it's thinner, it's curved, it's got the handguard, but still purple and silver. Of course, we do have an interchangeable left hand over here. So there we go. Remove that closed fist. That way he can hold on to the sword. So you can kind of have your sword wielding classic looking Fisto. But this version of Fisto comes with a new weapon as well, which is a great weapon for Fisto in the form of this giant hammer weapon. I mean, as if he needs to do some more smashing, he's also got a hammer to do some smashing as well. But this hammer has got a secret action feature. Check this out. The fist on Fisto, remember how I showed you it was jointed? How you can swivel at the wrist? Well, it's on a standard peg, and you can pop that wrist right apart. You can pull the fist right off of the arm there, and these heads on this hammer are also removable. Check this out. We can remove this mace-looking part right here, and we can now plug it into his hand, and it replaces the fist with this now mace-like wrecking ball, which is pretty cool. Or if you want to get even more serious, you could take that spike end of the hammer off, and you can place that on his arm as well. This version of Fisto has got a little bit of a trap jaw thing going on with this cybernetic arm with interchangeable hands. That is pretty fun. Definitely adds to the character, gives him a little something extra, which is pretty neat. But also, don't forget, Fist Hammer! Yeah! Honestly, I really like this one. I think the updates look really cool. I think the sculpt is really good. This is another really fun reimagining for the new Eternia lineup. And that brings us over to the new Eternia version of Sy-Klone. This is a really cool upgrade to the character, or new take on the character. He's got a very android-like look to him there. His entire body is painted with a metallic color, so you can see the yellows, the blues, all of it has this really great shine to it that almost gives his body like this metallic android-like effect, which is topped off by the way his face looks there. He's got that light blue Gar face, but you can see he's got kind of like these metallic extra lines drawn in, almost like tattoos or just markings. Maybe he is some sort of an android or android hybrid of some sorts. It's a really cool look, though. You'll also notice he's a lot thinner. Like, this really does have like that 2000X kind of vibe to it, because that version of the character was a lot thinner than the bigger muscular figures from the original Masters of the Universe toy line. I think this is a really cool look for the character, and it's another one where you look at it and you're still like, yeah, that's Sy-Klone. It looks like Sy-Klone. The helmet's got a really great shape to it with the red rings going around it. You can see kind of the red rings popping up off the shoulders here. I like these translucent blue kind of swirl pieces coming up out of the arms there. They're kind of attached to these red armbands, which are part of the sculpt of the arms there. You can see if we swivel at the shoulder there, at the bicep cut, those translucent parts just kind of swivel with the rest of the arm there. It's a really cool look for the character. I think he looks pretty awesome. And there's some new bits going on here. For example, he's got this mask. Look at this. He's got like this red face shield. And the way this works is it basically will just go up underneath the helmet here and clip onto the face, which is pretty neat and something totally new for this character that I'm aware of, giving him like a red face shield or face mask, which makes total sense considering this is like a flying character that he would want to cover up his face. You can see we've got him with closed fists right now. He does also come with a pair of interchangeable hands if you want some gripping hands, but he also comes with a yellow shield just like the original action figure. In fact, it even has these swirls on it, which come straight off the design of the shield from the original toy line, but this one is translucent yellow, and the way this works is it's actually got a peg so it can plug into either one of his forearms. You can see he's got peg holes there, so that way you can have the shield kind of plugged straight in. I like this because it feels like it would be like almost like a force field or something, right? That would project out of his forearm there. I think that's a really cool look. And we haven't even talked about the radar dish on his chest yet. Now, this was done with a lenticular sticker on the vintage toy. This time around, you can see it's like this translucent kind of bulbous window. And then you can see that there's some design on the inside there where it actually looks like there's several layers to it, giving it a bit of a three-dimensional look to the radar there with the map. It's pretty cool. I like that quite a bit as well. Now, the last thing that this version of Sy-Klone comes with are these red energy blast things, and there's actually a couple uses for these. First of all, if you want to, you can actually attach those to the shield here. You can see that we've got these little peg holes on the sides of the shield, and by attaching those red bolts to it, it almost gives it this vibe that the shield itself is spinning, which is a pretty cool effect. Now, of course, Sy-Klone's whole gimmick in the original toy line was that he spun. He created a Sy-Klone, right? He had the little dial on his back that spun the whole torso here at the top. Now, this one doesn't do that, but that's what else we can use these little red energy effects for, is to kind of create our own version of that effect. So I also want to show you he's got that same little hole on his back, so you could store the shield on his back if you want to. And then you can take those little red energy bursts and we can plug them onto his forearms there in the same holes that we used for the shield. And that way you can have the red energy effects kind of bursting off of his arms as if maybe he's spinning around, spinning his body around, creating his Sy-Klones. It's pretty cool. I like the effect there. And overall, I think this is a really cool rendition of the character. All right, we're going to jump over and take a look at the new Eternia Mer-Man, and oh boy, this is another one that I really like. In fact, as soon as this one was revealed, I was pretty amazed by what we've got going on here. And I really think that comes down to what they did with the face on this one. Now, first of all, I love the head sculpt on this. It is very reminiscent of what we saw in those original early card backs in the vintage line with the larger fins on top, the design of the face and the mouth and everything. Very, very cool look. But one of the things they did very different on this figure is they gave him that sort of glass eyes look. And I don't believe these are actually glass, but it's probably plastic, but you know what I'm talking about, right? It's got that cool effect where it's like these big bulbous eyes, and it almost looks like no matter which direction you're turning it, like the eyes follow you. You got that cool effect. Recently, I think it was Jakks Pacific did it with the Super Mario movie figures. So it's really cool seeing that work for somebody like Mer-Man here, who's got those big bulbous fish eyes. And I think it's a really cool look for the character and just makes him stand out as something unique and different from all the versions of Mer-Man that we had before him. Now, he does have very familiar armor that he's wearing there, but I do love the colors that are used there. Kind of a mixture of like yellows and bronze, a little bit of patina going on there, like almost got a little bit of like this rust look, which is really, really cool. I also really love the little seahorses on either end of the gem that's kind of on the chest armor there. I think that's just a really, really fun touch. On the back of the armor, there's actually a peg hole with a peg on his sword, so you can actually holster that on his back, which is very cool as well. Even his trunks have sort of a fish scale look to it, with the little weights kind of hanging down on there. It's got a really nice metallic-y bronze look to it. And then you've got that same very almost rusted look for the shin armor that he's wearing. I love the way that the hands also kind of fade from this almost metallic yellow like is seen on the armor there and kind of fades into the green of his arms with the fin sticking off. So rather than wearing like bright yellow gloves, it's actually part of his skin tone here. All in all, the paint looks really good on this one. I think the sculpt is a lot of fun. It's a very, very cool look for Mer-Man. Now we've got some interchangeable hands here as well, and I'm actually going to go ahead and swap at least one of those on because we do have two of the open hands with the more webbed fingers there, which is really great for like swimming poses with Mer-Man if that's something you want to do. And then of course, I already pulled that sword off of his back. Again, they did that thing where it's similar to the vintage sword, but it is a little different in its overall style because it's curved this time around. I always joke about the vintage one looking like corn on the cob. So this one kind of has that going on, but you can see it definitely has like some teeth, maybe some shark teeth or something on the actual blade, which is very cool. So he can hold on to that. You can plug it on his back. He also comes with this spear accessory. Now, we have seen Mer-Man come with a trident accessory a few times in the past, but this time we've got this spear, almost like a fishing spear, and I think that is a very cool accessory and works really well for Mer-Man as well. So all in all, this is another really fun new version of a classic character. I think this one was really, really well done. And that brings us to the new Eternia version of Evil Lyn. And oh my, this is a pretty toy. Seriously, I love this Evil Lyn, and I think there's no better place to start than with the face sculpt on this one. I mean, this is just really, really well done. I'm impressed with the paint. I'm impressed with the paint deco. I think she is gorgeous. It's also a really interesting take on Evil Lyn. Now, Evil Lyn has been presented in a number of different ways throughout various forms of media. Her vintage action figure had bright yellow skin. In the original Filmation series, her skin wasn't yellow, it was just more pale. But in the 2000X series, her skin was practically full on gray. So we've seen a lot of different looks for her. This one actually gives her almost some more of a glow to her skin. Like, her skin looks healthy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not like jaundice yellow, it's not pale gray, but it works here. I think it's a really, really nice looking figure. Her outfit is very Evil Lyn all the way to the core. I mean, I love all these little details like the tiny little silver skulls that kind of act as the belt going around the hips there. But, you know, the metallic blue adornments on the bodice look very similar to what we've seen for Evil Lyn in the past. I think the fur around the shoulders is a really nice touch, all the way up to her classic helmet, which just looks fantastic all the way around. The back of the figure has a cloth cape, which is a really nice touch. Definitely gives her that more Filmation vibe, which is another chance for me to say, hey, remember how the cartoon collection Evil Lyn didn't have a cape for some reason? What happened there, guys? Nonetheless, I'm glad that there's a cape on this figure. I think it works pretty well. I will say the fabric almost looks like it's cut just a little too big to be like stuck underneath the plastic fur on the armor there. You can see how like it's square on the top and it's sticking out, but minor nitpick because I do think the cape looks really nice on this figure. She's got those fur-topped classic MOTU style boots. All around, really nice looking Evil Lyn. Almost not very evil looking, so maybe that could be a criticism, but I still think she looks nice. I think this is a nice looking figure. Now, she comes with a whole bunch of interchangeable hands here. So right now you can see I've got her with one closed fist and one gripping hand. So it's worth noting that she has two gripping hands, two closed fists, but also she has two spellcasting hands, which is so perfect for this character. So just like with the other figures with interchangeable hands, it's pretty easy to pop those right out of the wrist, and then we can plug in the different hands. She's also got like blue fingernail paint. On some of the fingers, like on the spellcasting hands, it almost looks like she's got a little too much fingernail polish on. Like it looks like the whole tip of her finger has been dipped in paint. But I do still really like the look of the spell-casting hands. I'm really, really glad those are included. So her only other accessory comes in the form of her signature wand, which has been a staple of this character dating all the way back to the original toy line. And you can see there's a lot going on that really pays homage to that vintage figure. Like the colors of her outfit are very similar to that of the original action figure, all the way to that baby blue color that's used on her wand. There are some nice metallic highlights on there, and there's a semi-translucent blue orb that sits on the top of it. And what's really cool about that is it's glow in the dark, which again is another nod to the vintage action figure whose wand actually glowed in the dark, which is a little fact that a lot of people overlook about the vintage Evil Lyn. So yeah, the orb on the new one does glow in the dark. It's a very cool little added effect. All in all, I think this is a pretty nice looking Evil Lyn figure. The only other thing that I wanted to point out, I do feel like the hips are sitting a little too low. You can see like the legs, I guess. The legs are dropped a little lower than the hips there. And it's not really like that drop joint articulation where I could push the legs back up, because they don't really go up as far as I would like them to. So there's a little bit of a gap there that looks a little strange. But I don't know. Overall, I think this is a really gorgeous Evil Lyn action figure. And finally, that's going to bring me to the last figure I'm looking at today, which is the Mattel Creations exclusive new Eternia Horde Trooper. So since this one was exclusive to the Mattel Creations website, it did ship in its own exclusive packaging, which we've seen for some of the other Mattel Creations figures in the past. It's more of a square box. It's got a little drawer at the bottom that's got some accessories in it. It's got some beautiful artwork all the way around the box. And when we open this guy up, this is a beast of a figure. Seriously, bringing in the tape measure here, you can see that this figure stands about 8.5 inches tall, maybe pushing towards 9 inches tall. If I bring Mer-Man in here, just to show you, look at this. This is a massive figure, big old figure, and the first time I think that the Horde Troopers have really been presented as these gigantic mech-like troopers. Pretty fun stuff, and honestly, you look at this still looks like a Horde Trooper. It's got all the elements that you would expect. The shape of the armor, the domed head with the yellow visor. You even have that classic, very vintage toy version of the Horde logo right there on the chest with a round circle in the middle that looks like the push button on the vintage figure that made him fall apart. The armor is done in sort of like this gunmetal color, so it's got a bit of a shine to it, but it's darker gray than what we've seen with some versions of the Horde Trooper in the past, which is usually more of a light gray. You can see on his back he's got a holster where we can clip on this new sword accessory. It's a massive sword that has a Horde bat logo on it. It's incredibly cool. And in addition to that, we also get a red Horde Trooper staff, which is similar to the staff that was included with the vintage toy, but with the added difference that they articulated the wings on the little dragon that's on there, so you can open those up if you want to. It is very cool, gives you some different ways to arm this guy up, whether you want to just have one of these on your shelf, or if you want to army build because it's a Horde Trooper, you've got a couple different weapon options for the figure. Now, with this big size, I do always worry about, like, the heft, if it's too heavy, if it's going to stand well. I will say it feels very well balanced, and just so you know what the articulation looks like, we can swivel that dome head, put a pin in that, we're coming back to that dome head. So the arms articulate exactly like you would expect, with the shoulders going outwards, forwards, backwards. They will bang into this front armor just a little bit, but not so bad. You got that swivel at the bicep. You do have a nice double joint at the elbow there, swivel and hinge at the wrist. You can see we can roll that torso all the way around, which is very nice. Legs can go outwards. Again, we're going to get hindered just a little bit by these cylinders on the sides. Forwards, backwards, swivel at that thigh cut there. Very tight double joints in the knees. And then you can also move the feet at the ankles forwards, backwards, as well as rock side to side. Good solid articulation, especially in the legs, so it'll keep this guy standing on his feet, which is something that I really appreciate. So this is where we get to the biggest difference on this guy. And I know his size is already a big difference, but check this out. Mattel made it so that the helmet is removable on the Horde Trooper, which reveals this guy inside. Who the heck is that? In past media, specifically the Princess of Power series, where we saw the Horde Troopers, they've always been depicted as robots. Now, in very early concept art, when Mattel and Filmation were coming up with the idea, there is some concept art that exists that shows different races that might have actually been in the Horde army. You can see some of that concept art over on Battle Ram blog, which is a great site I would highly recommend checking out. But none of them specifically looked like this guy. So the only thing I could think is that this must be Mattel's way to kind of homage that. They put a face behind the mask, which is really interesting. And more than that, you can also remove this upper armor, which is just kind of clipped on up here. If you give it a good tug, boom, it'll just pop right off the figure. And that reveals this really interesting translucent red body underneath that armor and gives you a closer look at the weird goblin-like head underneath. You can even see his neck and like parts of his shoulders in there a little bit, as if he is smaller in stature, piloting a large mech suit, like he's Tony Stark driving a Hulkbuster or something. Now, looking at the helmet, I also want to show how the yellow visor is like translucent yellow. So that actually has a really cool look to it. And when the figure is wearing it, I'm going to pop it on here without the other armor, which doesn't really work as good. But you can see how it still kind of hides his face. You can just barely see that there's somebody under that visor, but it's good enough that it still obscures it. So it's a really interesting concept, having some sort of creature or an actual like pilot driving the Horde Trooper armor. But just the same, if you're not into that, if you just keep that helmet on, you can't tell. It still just looks like a giant Horde Trooper. So I do like that. I like that. I would assume this is the way most of us would display him anyway, on the shelf in the armor. But it is really cool. It's really neat seeing like these big giant troopers, and it really does kind of make it seem a little more threatening, having a whole army of these giant either robots or giant mech suits walking around that She-Ra and the Great Rebellion have to fight.
So there you go, a whole bunch of new Eternia figures from the Masterverse line. A lot of these I really like. Some of them I like. They're almost there. They're not quite perfect. In fact, I wouldn't call any of them perfect, but what toy out there really is perfect? I know, there's a bunch of comments right now saying, well, Masters of the Universe Classics is perfect. And look, that's totally great, because we're all gonna like the things that we like, and that is okay. I love Masters of the Universe Classics. We do this thing, though, where we tend to compare everything to the thing that we like the best. And sometimes we do that negatively. Hell, my videos alone have a segment that people expect from me called Comparison Time, where I do just that. I compare various versions of the figures. But that started when I was reviewing the Masters of the Universe Classics line, where the whole point of that line was to improve upon the vintage figures, or at least take those vintage designs and bring them to an updated collector action figure. So the point of Comparison Time there was to say, here's the original, and here's what it looks like now. And now Comparison Time feels a little different. We've had so many different versions of these characters now, from several different toy lines, that I like to show the evolution of the different figures, but it's not always an evolution, meaning it's not always improving upon what came before it. Sometimes it's just stylistically different. And I do like showing that, but I know that it's really easy to look at that and say, well, that one's better, this one's better, and that's not always my intent with that. All right, I know you guys are waiting for it, so let's just go ahead and do it. It's comparison time. Here's several of those new Eternia figures that we just looked at, standing alongside the Masters of the Universe Classics figures. And I really want to highlight what I'm talking about by looking at these pictures. First of all, yeah, man, I love Masters of the Universe Classics. Pulling these figures off the shelf and shooting them again, it always makes me feel happy. But when I look at the Masterverse figures next to these, I think the thing that really stands out about them is they feel like a new interpretation of these classic designs. MOTU Classics was a literal translation of the vintage toys. Masterverse New Eternia is more akin to what Mattel did during the 2000X line, where they were taking something familiar, but changing it, giving it a new look and a new feel. And I think that is okay too. I like a lot of these figures, and I think it's really fun to see them all standing next to each other, and I think it's great that we can all pick out our favorites. Because if anything, we've got so much MOTU now that there's something out there for everybody. And that's pretty crazy to think about, because when MOTU Classics first started, we were starving for more He-Man and more Skeletor and more She-Ra and Hordak. And now we've got so much to choose from. It's really crazy to think about where the industry has come as far as toy lines made for collectors. The Masters of the Universe Classics toy line was fairly new, kind of taking what Toy Biz did with Marvel Legends and applying that to Masters of the Universe. That toy line dropped in 2008. In 3 short years, that toy line will be 20 years old, which is about as far away as the original Masters of the Universe line was to that line starting. I guess it was closer to almost 30, but you get the idea, right? Collector toys have now been around long enough to be nostalgic. maybe almost vintage, depending on how you call it that. And that is a crazy thing to think about.